Every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday. Tuesday, Casual Tuesday. Wednesday, Casual Hump Day. Thursday, Casual Thurs. That's what we call it. And Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, September 1, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today from the Uber blog Hullabaloo, and also from her perch at salon.com, Heather Digby Parton will be joining us. We will also have a quick appearance to plug a show she's doing this weekend and to tease a future visit to talk about Cop City. Jamie Peck will be joining us briefly. Then Matthew Film Guy to give us a film selection for the weekend to watch. Meanwhile, Georgia Governor Kemp says he will quash Republican attempts to impeach Fulton County prosecutor as Trump pleads not guilty. Incidentally, the judge says that the Trump Georgia case will be televised. Mitch McConnell releases a doctor's note saying he's medically clear to keep working. Proud Boy Joe Biggs and Zachary Rail get 17 and 15 years respectively in their insurrection charges. American Airlines flight attendants vote to authorize a strike. Meanwhile, the UAW accuses GM of unfair labor practices. COVID childcare support to end this month. Just one more decision we have made as a society to immiserate people. Body cam footage of a cop killing Takia Young. A 21-year-old black pregnant woman will be released today. Texas Supreme Court allows gender-affirming care for kids ban to proceed in that state, while another court has a temporary injunction on the ban on drag, if you can believe it. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. Emma's out today. Matt is also out today. Bradley holding down the fort in a mild state of panic. We had some tech issues at the beginning of the show today, but all is well for the moment. We're going to talk to Heather more about this. We've got we had some economic numbers also today. I somehow lost them in my shuffle here, but job numbers came out. Unemployment rate pops up a little bit, rose to 3.8%. Payrolls increased by about 187,000. That's good, not particularly great. That's about the amount that it takes to keep up with new people entering the job force. So the Fed's attempts to at least soften the labor market seem to have worked okay. Job openings fell. It's still well above where they were prior to COVID, prior to the pandemic, but it's at its lowest levels in terms of job openings since March of 2021. So we'll see where this heads. but there will be another sort of cliff. You know, we had that Medicaid cliff, which ended up sending a lot of people off the Medicaid rolls that actually were still eligible. Now we're having the child care funding cliff that's going to happen in about 30 days, where federal funding that has been subsidizing child care for the past 2 or 3 years, 2 years, I guess, is going to end. And so people are going to be having to pay more for child care to the extent that they can. And as a society, it just passes as if this was just a function of nature, as opposed to the lesson that we should have learned from COVID, which is that these policies work. Meanwhile, we'll be talking also with Digby about what happened with the National Labor Relations Board. And I don't know how much of this is a function of that, but I think we're going to progressively see unions get more aggressive because they're going to have more ability to organize. Every bit of small administrative change, and this one that we saw with the Cemex case this week was by no means small, but every little change empowers unions more, and then it's good to see them flexing it. Here is UAW President Shawn Fain. This was released today to UAW members. Remember, we are now 14 days out, 13 days out from a potential strike. And the UAW did also file with the National Labor Relations Board, saying that at least some bargaining units, GM and the Jeep maker Stellantis, of not bargaining in good faith. That's 2 weeks before these labor contracts are set to expire. This is an attempt to get the union membership ready for a strike. Here is Shawn Fain.
You know, I heard this saying once that every billionaire is a policy failure. Truer words have never been spoken. Billionaires, in my opinion, don't have a right to exist. The very existence of billionaires shows us that we have an economy that is working for the benefit of the few and not the many. I say the same's true for poverty wages and long hours. We need to wipe them out. The labor movement once fought for a vision of work life in which everyone had 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for recreation. Sadly, it feels like we've gone so far backwards that we have to fight just to have the 40-hour work week back. Why is that? So another asshole can make enough money to shoot himself to the moon?
Good point. Good point. The UAW is looking for a 46% pay increase for workers over the life of the contract and a 32-hour work week. But this broader point of billionaires being a policy failure, not only is it necessarily mean that there is essentially less money for a greater number of people because it's being hoarded by a small group of people, but it also, the same can be said for political power. And the danger that it represents to have billionaires, we've talked about in the past, just in the context of the Gates Foundation and their destructive work on education in this country over the past 20 years. But it's good to see these union folks ramping up. And certainly there is no doubt that while this National Labor Relations Board thing is going to help unions organize and expand, if they take the opportunity. The point is it's emboldening unions, I think, and that's a good thing. We're going to get to Digby in just a moment. First, a word from one of our sponsors. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, sunsetlakesebede.com. If you use the coupon code LEFTISBEST, you get 20% off. This is one of my favorite sponsors. It's because the product I use in one form or another almost every single day. They have tinctures that help you go to sleep, that help you relax. They've got tinctures with melatonin. They've got tinctures with 3 different concentrations, maybe 4, of strength. Like I say, 3 different flavors. They have gummies. They have gummies with melatonin. They have gummies that just help you chill out. I use this stuff for sleep. Sometimes I alternate. Sometimes I use it for when I'm spending a day with a 10-year-old who's not always, and sometimes it can be difficult and trying, and that's one of the ways I like to relax. I also use their smokables as maybe like you have a nice dinner and you don't want to smoke something more strong. It's a great way to enjoy yourself that way. It also is Sebede has an entourage effect. So they have flour, they have keef, they have fudge, they have coffee. There's a great weekend brew, and all of their products, third-party tested. Their growing practices are excellent. They practice regenerative farming, so they protect the land. They do integrated pest management, so they have no use for pesticides. They are a great company in terms of mostly employee-owned, $20 minimum wage, and they are movement partners. They have dedicated and contributed tens of thousands of dollars just over the past couple of years for things like strike relief funds, for help with the floods that were happening up in Vermont. They're based outside of Burlington. They have provided for food pantries and refugee resettlement and give directly. And they have contributed money for carceral reform. Just an all-around great company, all-around great product, sunsetlakesebede.com. Use the code LEFTISBEST for 20% off. sunsetlakesebede.com. As always, we have that link in our podcast and YouTube description. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Digby. We are back. Oh, here we go. All right, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Well done, Bradley. The famous Digby's theme song. Heather Parton, columnist at salon.com, of course, proprietor of one of the Uber blogs. There's not many of those original blogs out there. I mean, back in the day, it was Atrios, and Eschaton is still it's still up there, still on the Blogger platform, and Hullabaloo, and Josh Marshall's operation has gotten obviously much bigger. Daily Codes is obviously a juggernaut, but not many others of those sort of big mainstays at the time. Different era.
No, there are definitely a different era. About 20 years ago, actually. So it's a long time, but it's kind of amazing how the whole, what we used to call the blogosphere is morphed into something, much bigger, grander, and more professionalized. But there's still a few of us out there that are still doing that, and most of us have, sort of other gigs that we do at the same time. Now, I think maybe Atrios may be the only one that I can think of that is still just really operating solo as a blogger. I mean, but it's been a while. It has been a while.
It has been a while. All right, well, let's get into this. Maybe that's a good. And back when we started, Joe Biden, Mitch McConnell, we're just older men, I guess.
Right.
Middle age,
spry 60-somethings, yeah.
But let's talk about this, because I guess let's start with Trump. Obviously, Trump people are in the news. He has pled not guilty. He has waived his right to an arraignment in person in Georgia. The judge overseeing that case said that it's going to be televised. And we know that this case is going to continue because Kemp, the governor there, has basically said, I'm going to veto any attempt to impeach her, which Republicans, in fact, we have a clip of this. Let's play this, Bradley. This is they've been talking about impeaching her or defunding her. Let's play this clip for number 4 first. This is Georgia State Senator Colton Moore talking about defunding Fani Willis, the Georgia State prosecutor. This was yesterday. A Fulton County prosecutor. One second. Here we go. Clip number 4.
Sorry, Sam. Oh my God. One second, I got it.
We got it?
Yep, yep.
Okay, here it is.
My goodness, how many people in my district questioned that election? I mean, and now that we've got 19 people who are facing the rest of their life in prison because they spoke out against an election. I mean, I told one senator, I said, listen, we've got to put our heads together and figure this out. We need to be taking action right now, because if we don't, our constituencies are going to be fighting it in the streets. Do you want a civil war? I don't want a civil war. I don't want to have to draw my rifle. I want to make this problem go away with my legislative means of doing so. And the first step to getting that done is defunding Fani Willis of any Georgia tax dollars. And hopefully Representative Jordan and Representative Biggs will follow suit in Congress and strip her of her federal dollars too, because she is not upholding her oath to the Constitution.
We're going to get to the federal part about this, because this is part of that story. And, aside from the guy basically saying, like, we either strip her of her authority to carry out her prosecutorial duties, or we're going to have to unsheath our weapons. And I mean, that's an interesting. In fact, Joe Biggs and another member of the Proud Boys, they went to prison, or they were sentenced to prison yesterday between the two of them, 17 and 15 years, for more or less a similar sentiment, frankly, or I should say not so much the sentiment, but actually carrying it out. Here is Governor Brian Kemp. He is asked a question by an unidentified reporter who is off camera at a news conference about the idea of Colton Moore's efforts to defund Fani Willis. Here is that clip.
Senator Moore is also talking about pursuing the funding, the statutory funding that goes to district attorney's office. Can you address that?
Well, I think the speaker laid that out pretty clearly yesterday, because if he's wanting to defund a district attorney, it's going to defund all of them. And this is a conversation. He's a legislator. If he wants to have that conversation, he can do it during the regular session that we have coming up in January. But let me just say this. You know, these are the distractions that get you to lose elections. The last time we were talking about special sessions here in the state of Georgia, just a few weeks later, the Republican majority lost 2 U.S. Senate races.
So he's trying to couch it as, don't want to lose elections. And he's probably right. It probably doesn't help. I mean, this is, and this dynamic is sort of one that we see on a national stage, isn't it? Right? I mean, they're going to try and do this in the House.
Oh, they're definitely trying to do this stuff everywhere they can. And yeah, I thought it was very interesting that Kemp did this yesterday, because he is, he's in a purple state, right? I mean, this is a guy who has seen the 2 Senate seats go for the first time in 100 years or something to to Democrats. He understands the political dynamic in his state and recognizes that the way that these people are going about this is completely counterproductive for the Republican Party. Brian Kemp is not a great guy. He is a right-wing Republican. He is somebody that I really kind of loathe in terms of policy. But in this one respect, he at least shows some, pragmatism and some, some sense of courage in the face of the MAGA cult. And this thing that he said yesterday, I was actually quite surprised that he did it, because what happens in Georgia is that they had 2 things going on. One is that they have this commission. They just passed a law last year that there's a commission that would decide whether or not district attorneys could be fired for failing to do their jobs. It's similar to what DeSantis has down in Florida. So they wanted to kick that in, and they wanted Kemp to, Kemp picks the commission, and they wanted him to speed that up and get that going. They also wanted to do this defunding business through a special session of the legislature. This guy Moore that we saw the clip of, I mean, he's really, you could say what he is. Right. I mean, he's basically calling for civil war and saying, nice little country you have there, be ashamed if anything happened to it. But Kemp came along and did this, and that's a very interesting dynamic, because it sort of is a reflection of what happened in 2020 after the election, when they did all the recounts, the court cases. They had all these, all the Sturm und Drang going on in the swing states with Rudy Giuliani and his whole crew there trying to persuade them to find votes, et cetera, et cetera. There were Republicans who stood up and said, in these states where there were Republican legislatures and Republican officials said, well, no, we're not going to do that. Kemp is basically doing that too. Now, the reason, let's be clear. I'm not going to say that these people are all just great defenders of democracy and golly gosh, shouldn't we let's all give them money or something, because they're just being practical politicians. Right. They're in swing states. they're looking at this going, this is nuts. If we throw in with this MAGA group, we're never going to get elected again. We're pushing our state into the blue category, and when really we're purple. Right now we've got some chances here, and they're trying to find some way to get this through. So I thought that was really interesting, and it does indicate that, we're going to be dealing with these trials for the next year, possibly more. That's unless something happens to completely upend this, and we can talk about that, because there is at least one way in the Georgia case that this could all get completely messed up, which would be that Mark Meadows and Donald Trump could end up getting removed to the federal court, and the federal court dismisses the case under this supremacy clause, that they have immunity from state charges. That could happen, and I honestly think there's a fairly good chance that could happen. It won't happen with all the rest of them. Rudy Giuliani wasn't a federal employee, but Trump and Meadows were, so that could happen. People should gird themselves for that possibility. But other than that, it doesn't really matter from a political standpoint, because if these trials are going on, one is set to start in late October, this guy Kenneth Chesebro, and I guess Sidney Powell too. You're going to go forward. We're going to see these things laid out. Those are televised trials. We're going to see all the facts laid out. This is going to be part of our election cycle in a way that it's like nothing we've ever seen before. This is really, really amazing stuff. This is all. We saw the January 6th committee, which was really great. And I think really kind of changed the dynamic for a lot of people, and maybe set the stage for these trials to come. But in a televised trial, we've all watched them before. You're going to get the defense to come into that, and they're going to have things to say to try and defend their behavior. It's going to be a very, very interesting election season. Let's just put it that way. And then, if the federal trial comes in, all bets are off if that happens in March.
Just one word about that. The way that works, if it goes to a federal court, if Meadows and Trump can argue successfully that this belongs in a federal court because they were working in a federal capacity, then the opportunity to get it dismissed in a federal court because of the supremacy clause goes up. The state court would never dismiss anything based on the supremacy clause. They have no cause of action there. The argument will be from the prosecution in the event that this case does get remanded to a federal court, that they weren't working in their official capacity as federal officials, because if Mark Meadows actually believed that to be the case, they would have brought in members of the Department of Justice, or they would have brought in the DHS to be on these calls with the Secretary of State of Georgia. They wouldn't have just been freelancing. They thought there was an actual sort of like problem with a federal election. It's not, you bring the federal government to bear. You don't just sort of do this on the sly. But we'll see whether that functions. But the court case, this is the sort of the dilemma. Kemp doesn't have it because he's in a statewide election, and governors can stand out from their party in a way that like House people and senators and presidents can't. And so this is the dilemma that they have, right? They're always trying to split the difference. And the problem is that only can work in very specific circumstances. Let's talk about this impeachment dynamic, because I can't quite figure out what McCarthy's deal is. Does this increase the opportunity to not have a government shutdown? You wrote about this impeachment thing. Like, what's the give and get here? Because it does feel like they're going to do impeachment. But the funny part, and I think we got a clip on this and we'll play it in a second, like nobody's quite clear on what grounds they're impeaching it. Like on the Hunter Biden grounds, like.
Yeah, I think that's what they think they're going to do it on. And, I think McCarthy basically, it seems to me, this is really interesting. And I agree with you. It's very confusing. I had thought originally that what McCarthy had done was that he thought that he could by giving the MAGA people an impeachment inquiry, not really an impeachment vote, but an inquiry, and pushing and rhetorically kind of backing them with all this Biden crime family stuff and giving them that red meat that they desired, that he could somehow finesse this government shutdown, that this was going to be kind of a quid pro quo. I'll give you all this crazy stuff, but we've got to keep the government running. It's not working. It's not working at all, because the MAGAs want both. I mean, you've got this guy, Chip Roy, down in Texas, who's basically running the sort of MAGA caucus within the Freedom Caucus. And he's dead serious about shutting down the government. And he's dead serious about doing this on a number of, some of the demands in this shutdown are ridiculous. One of which appears to be, although it's not explicit, is the impeachment. The other is that they want to defund the Department of Justice and the FBI, and they've got to. They're dead serious about trying to push this thing. Now everybody knows that that's a very, very, not everybody, but most Republicans know that this doesn't really work out well for Republicans, generally speaking. That when they shut down the government, things don't go well. They end up paying a political price, but they seem determined to do it anyway. And so, this is what we're stuck with, is this very, very bizarre kind of negotiation among themselves. The Democrats are uninvolved, obviously. They, what are they going to do? I mean, the only thing that the only role they might play in this is maybe to step in and save Kevin McCarthy if somehow or another he decides that for the good of the country, they can't shut down the government, so he brings it to a vote and Democrats save him. And then when they do the motion to vacate the chair, which is the big sword of Damocles that's hanging over Kevin McCarthy's head, then the Democrats come in. But I don't see how that works, because Kevin McCarthy could never. He would have control over his pocket, but he was saved by Democrats. So this is going to be a big mess, Sam. I mean, I am really concerned about this. I think there's going to be impeachment happening over nothing. I mean, they don't have any evidence to impeach him. Nobody knows what. I mean, there's no evidence.
It's not even so much they don't have evidence. It's not even clear what the charge is. I mean, I guess it's corruption because
bribery is what I think they're saying. Bribery. That's what I keep hearing, that he was bribed, that Joe Biden was bribed by, I don't know, or he was bribing. I mean, it is hard to.
But they're not saying that he is being bribed now. They're saying that
this was years ago,
in the interim period between maybe when he was vice president, maybe in the last year of his vice presidency, or the interim period, he was bribed.
Right.
To do
somewhere
what? It's
in that
unclear.
Area. And there's no evidence. They don't have any, the money is unclear. They don't know where this money is. They don't have any evidence of the transactions that supposedly happened. There's a lot of innuendo. The new one this week is that they found that Hunter Biden, on his Burisma email account, emailed the vice president a bunch of times on his email account. And I'm going, well, he's his son. He was probably at work. He probably, hey, Dad, I'll be late for Thanksgiving dinner or whatever. I mean, how this is, but that's the kind of innuendo that we're dealing with. The big headlines on Fox News, oh my God, he emailed his father, and this is supposed to be shocking. So that's the kind of thing that we're dealing with. But that's going to be happening at the same time that you have these people making these outlandish demands. They've got to end woke. One of the demands is the Freedom Caucus has actually put out a statement. They've got to end woke Pentagon policies, for instance, and it's not just end, defund the Pentagon woke policies. Well, what does that mean? I mean, that's insane. And of course the people over in the Senate are going, yeah, well, swivel on this. We're not doing that. What are you talking about? So there's no chance that this could ever pass, but of course we end up coming into a government shutdown.
Right.
And they think maybe that a government shutdown might preclude the Jack Smith. Oh, and they want to defund the special counsel, of course. That goes without saying. And Trump has been pushing that one. But it doesn't make any difference, because if they did do a government shutdown, the Justice Department continues. They don't stop trials. This is funding that exists regardless. They don't just, they don't send the prosecutors home. They don't send the FBI home. They continue to do this in a government shutdown. So that won't work as a delaying tactic, which I think maybe was in their minds, that maybe, we'll do a government shutdown. That'll delay the trials another couple of months or something, because they won't be able to work. But the Department of Justice has said, no, we keep going when this sort of thing happens. So it's going to be a big mess, and it's coming right up. This is going to the first vote.
This is the end of this month.
Yeah, because they've got to do an extension. McConnell said earlier, before he had his little episode, that he thought they would do an extension to the end of the year, and then because they haven't passed any appropriations bills. I think they passed one, so that's not going to happen. So they have to pass an extension. Maybe McCarthy can get them to do that. I don't know, but they're not looking to do it. Let's just put it this way. And I think they could head right up into Christmas with nothing, the House with absolutely nothing. And we could be in, a big, big mess between, government shutdown, primaries coming up, trials ongoing, and it is going to be wild. It is going to be, as Trump would say, it'll be wild. Yeah, definitely.
Let's play this clip from Greta Van Susteren. Apparently is on Newsmax these days.
Is that right? I hadn't heard of it.
And here she is interviewing Representative David Kustoff, who's a Republican from Tennessee. This sort of sums it up, but then I want to talk about impeachment, because you and I both remember the Clinton impeachment years. Let's play this.
Committee.
Congressman, I followed this reasonably closely. I don't have any sort of behind-the-scenes, closed-door interview documents. I can't get access to those. But what I don't understand is this. What I've seen so far makes things look really shady involving Hunter Biden. But I don't see exactly what it is that you maintain are high crimes and misdemeanors, which would warrant an impeachment. So exactly what is it that the president did to either take money illegally or change policies? Tell me exactly what it is. Is it getting the prosecutor fired in Ukraine? Is that it, or what are you focusing on?
Well, there's a lot, and obviously that the firing of the Ukrainian prosecutor is something that we need to further develop. I go back to, if I can, the investigation that came out of the Ways and Means Committee, where you had these agents who talked about that they were stymied in their investigation, and specifically the WhatsApp message that we all know about, where Hunter Biden was communicating with this Chinese emissary, and he talked about that his father was right there. Well, if his father truly was right there, that leads to not only concerns from people in my district, but I think people across the country, and that leads to high crimes and misdemeanors. The problem that I've got, among others, is that those two agents testified that they were stymied by people within the Department of Justice and the IRS.
But that seems to me, directly, my first question is that the Attorney General is responsible there, and I've got a beef with the Attorney General about him looking the other way in this Fulton County jail, which I think is deplorable. But do you have anything, are you saying that the President told the Attorney General just, look the other way and don't do anything? It seems to me is that the Attorney General would be someone I'd want to ask questions of.
Well, you're right. We're kind of backtracking a little bit. We want to hear from the Attorney General. We want to hear from U.S. Attorney and now Special Counsel David Weiss. But if I...
All right. Well, that's all we need to hear on that. I just want to just run down what he said. What are you? She asked, "What are you charging him with?" And then he says, "Well, we got to further develop stuff," and the people were stymied from Hunter Biden investigation. And then there's that WhatsApp Chinese. If his father was right there, that's concerning to people in my district. And that leads to high crimes and misdemeanors. Like they don't even, they can't even work their way. Like they can't even work their way through a Newsmax interview.
They can't. And I mean, first of all, let's just take this one piece of it, this Victor Shokin business that they said right at the beginning. And he said, well, we've got to develop more evidence or something like that. There is no evidence. The problem, that story has been debunked over and over and over again. The supposedly Biden is accused of, forcing them trying to force the Ukrainian government to fire Victor Shokin, who was a prosecutor, for going after Burisma. The truth is that basically the entire Western world wanted them to fire Victor Shokin because he is a complete corrupt, puppet of Moscow. But that's beside the point. The most important point is that one of the reasons that they wanted to fire Victor Shokin was because he wasn't investigating Burisma, which is an exact opposite. And this was when Hunter was involved with Burisma. It's the opposite. It's actually Biden, kind of going against the interests of his own son by demanding that this guy, be fired, and they could put in a prosecutor who would go after Burisma. So that's completely nonsensical, and that's been out there for years. And it was part of the basis of the whole brouhaha around Biden's first impeachment was about this Burisma stuff. It's like, I really wonder why these people don't think it would be best to kind of let the Burisma stuff go, because that doesn't really play well for them. I don't think, but I guess maybe they're just throwing stuff out there in the hopes that they can just smear Biden and set up the idea that, maybe Trump's on trial for four different indictments and 91 different charges, but Biden's just as bad. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. That's their goal here. And it's astonishing how they can't even put together a thesis, a hypothesis of what happened. They're all over the place. That guy had absolutely no clue. All he was saying is, we're going to impeach him, and we'll figure it out as we go along, I guess.
It was a lot of he never even said obstruction. He was basically saying there was styminess for a while with these, and yes, and again, yes, it was stated U.S. policy. They don't have even an accusation that seems to be that they need to prove. I don't even know exactly what they would do there. But let's just talk about the political implications of this. There is a lot of fear in a lot of those frontline Republicans, people who won particularly in California and New York State, who won in 2020. I should say 2022, they're afraid of this impeachment. And it's interesting because Nancy Pelosi fought tooth and nail to not impeach George Bush when she was in the House. She bragged about it after the fact. I'm sure you remember John Conyers had a book like this on how we would impeach George W. Bush. I mean, the guy lied the country into a war. I think he... Frankly, I think what George W. Bush did was more, I think, an impeachment of him was as much, if not more, warranted than the one of Trump. Trump's was definitely warranted, but I think George W. Bush's was also warranted. No doubt. And maybe for things that were, January 6th was pretty bad. But also the Iraq War was pretty bad, and in different ways. But I think Bush was more warranted. Democrats, and she was very reluctant to impeach Trump too. There was a lot of concern that it was going to be electorally bad for Democrats, and it turned out not to be the case.
Right.
electorally bad at all. It seemed to have absolutely sort of no. The only salience it had, it seems to me, in the election was that it was the absence of people who were against Trump feeling demoralized.
Right.
And that was the one, like I don't know that it had any affirmative value. I don't think it got any new votes, but it kept people engaged from losing votes because they felt like he needed to be impeached.
Yeah.
But for Republicans, when they impeached Bill Clinton, and I'm convinced it would be the same thing with Joe Biden.
Yep.
I think it is a genuine political liability for them because they have no cause to do it. They're not gaining anything from their supporters. It seems to me they're certainly not broadening their base. They just look like they're off the deep end.
Absolutely. It's just flat out retribution, which Trump says, I am your retribution. He is exhorting these people to impeach to impeach Joe Biden and saying it explicitly. They impeached me. You got to impeach him. I mean, he's saying this. This isn't something that they're sort of whispering behind the scenes. This is absolutely, and any person with any sentient being can see that's what this is, that there is no, obvious necessity to impeach Joe Biden because of something that happened when he was vice president and before he was president. I mean, everybody, and see, that was part of the problem with the Whitewater investigation that went on for years, back in the Clinton years, was that most people were kind of going, wait a minute, why are they spending so much time investigating this stuff that happened, years and years ago? He's president now. And when the Monica Lewinsky thing came up, it just seemed like the Republicans aren't very good at hiding their intentions. And so when the Monica Lewinsky thing came up, it was not an impeachable offense by any means, but you could see that they had been working themselves up into this with a deep desire to impeach Bill Clinton, and they just found something and they did it. Well, the American people, generally speaking, are not so stupid that they can't see through this. It's just what you said when the impeachment of Donald Trump, the first impeachment, was clearly that event that he was impeached over, that phone call to Zelensky and the plot to, basically extort them, the Ukrainian government into, smearing his political opponent, was clearly a high crime and misdemeanor. And it stood in for, dozens of other things that Trump had been doing. And everybody knew that this guy was doing this stuff all the time. He was doing it openly. I mean, he fired James Comey because he wouldn't, do what he wanted him to do, but politically speaking. And this was going on. And that's the sort of, the big 30,000-foot thematic thing that goes on with these kinds of impeachments. What we're seeing now with this proposed Biden impeachment is that they're just saying, well, it's payback. It's payback. And that is not going to work for the Republicans. I don't think it will. You're absolutely right. Their people will love it. It's red meat. They, go for it. Lock him up, do whatever. But, they need to have a certain number of independent voters who actually think that Donald Trump and the Republicans are going to be better for them. And this is the kind of thing that really convinces them that they're not, because they're not being serious. If the Republicans wanted to, really do something for themselves in the next election, they'd stop with all this Biden stuff and be sitting there pushing their, so-called agenda of, what the usual tax cuts and whatever, and reassure those, sort of mushy middle people that, hey, we're going to actually, be in the business of governing here. You don't have to worry. We're not crazy. We're not like Donald Trump. Instead, they're doing the opposite. They're saying, we are Donald Trump. This is what you want more Donald Trump, that we're going to give it to you. Whether he's here or not, you're going to get it. That impeachment, all this crazy stuff with the investigations is all about being MAGA. That's what it is. That's the whole, it's all about owning the libs and going after their enemies and all of that stuff. And I don't think maybe I'm wrong. I mean, we'll see. The polls don't look that great. I mean, it looks pretty tight. So maybe I'm wrong here, but I just don't feel like it's going to work for them this time.
I mean, I tend to agree, but also I feel, even 90%, 85% confident about none of this, I should say.
Yeah, me
but
too. I mean, I don't mean to be confident because I'm
right.
not.
I mean,
I'm not.
and the last two elections have been one by Trump, one by Biden, if we believe that,
Right.
that by literally just, several tens of thousands of people spread
Yeah.
across 3 to 5 states. And so it doesn't take much to change the outcome of this election,
Because
with
of
the
our
Electoral College.
antiquated
Yeah,
our
yeah.
antiquated electoral college.
And-
I mean,
Let's look at just the other side of that. I mean, there's been Biden's National Labor Relations Board in the Cemex case. I guess this ruling really came on Friday. Has been very underreported. We had Harold Meyerson on Wednesday to talk about this. He seems to be the only person who's written about it in the press. I've also read about it extensively on labor law lawyer sites who have had to write this up for their clients because it has a lot of implications for their clients, whether they are, if people unionize or for, they represent labor in this instance. But just to remind people about the Cemex cases, I think this is huge. The Teamsters, they had an election to unionize this company, Cemex. After the election, they lost it narrowly. They went and filed complaints with the National Labor Relations Board saying that there were unfair labor practices, there was retribution for attempts of unionizing, all the things, the union busting that happens. This happened with Bessemer, the first Amazon Bessemer thing. And what they did on the Bessemer case, National Labor Relations Board heard the Bessemer union's complaints, and they ordered a second election, which the union still lost. Same scenario here with Cemex, but instead of ordering another election, they came up with an entire policy change that went back to a 1948 position on this labor law, which is now instead of another election, we're just going to say the union exists. And say to the companies, you've got to bargain now in good faith with this union. The union now exists. They win the election because you practiced unfavor. You were involved in unfair labor practices. And this basically says now, if a majority of the workers in a shop, and we don't know exactly how they're going to, the union says a majority of the workers in the shop have signed union cards. The employer has 2 weeks to recognize the union or file a challenge to the validity of this. And if the challenge is upheld, then an election happens. But if there is any violations of labor law, unfair practices, it's no longer about a fine or this or that. It is union exists, end of story. That's the ball game. And there's a lot of union busting law firms out there going like, we just lost our business model. And so this is a big deal. We also saw finally, and you and I have heard this probably our entire adult lives, that Medicare has to have the ability to negotiate for drug prices, which is an obvious thing. And for supposed free marketers, you would want that, right? And finally, it appears to be happening, subject to court challenges, of course. But that's where we're at. That's a big deal. Nevertheless, Biden's numbers are not great at all. The biggest complaint seems to be his age, which of course is immutable. But one wonders how salient that will be in an election against Donald Trump, who's of similar age and obviously is much more hated widely. But then the real question becomes what if Donald Trump is in jail and the Republicans somehow figure out how to not get him on the ballot. I mean, really more likely it's Donald Trump has been struck by lightning or hit by a bus or had a heart attack and he's no longer a candidate. Is really the only scenario I see. I don't think the Republicans will ever take him off the ballot. I think they'd be stupid to.
I don't either. No, they're not going to do that.
I think they would be stupid to. They would lose every down ballot race there was if they took him off the ballot, even if they were completely convinced he was going to lose the presidency. So I think, the real question is like, can Biden both fight off the perception that he's too old to be president, and B, can Biden make it to the election because he's, we saw Mitch McConnell this week. I mean, I think, everything I've been reading suggests that maybe McConnell has some type of like epileptic seizure situation going on that might be a function of his fall.
Yeah.
There's no way to diagnose this from a distance, but they don't seem to be treating it in the way that you would expect people to be treating it. The people around him anyways, they don't seem to be terribly concerned, other than like the optics. But I mean, the optics are what they are. Who knows how it's going to inhibit him? I mean, it couldn't get more bizarre, could it?
No, we've already discussed how bizarre the actual, circumstances are going to be around this election. This is an entirely, different problem. And there's no doubt about it. People are very concerned about Biden's age. In real life, when I talk to people, it's really the first thing that anybody says to me, oh my God, he's so old. Yep. My counter to that is always, yeah, he's old, but do you think he's done a bad job as president? And usually I'm talking to liberals, my friends, people like that. And do you think he's done a bad job? Has it shown up somehow in his presidency? They go, well, no, he's done a pretty good job. I'm going, yeah. And I said, well, do you think it would be worth taking a chance on Donald Trump? No, God, no. So I don't know whether or not when we get into the period where they're voting, and this is actually happening, and it's Biden versus Trump, that it's going to be that salient. I mean, it feels salient. The one thing I can say, though, is that I think one of the big problems here, and I hate to say this because I'm not really sure I understand what the problem is that people don't like Kamala Harris. If there was a vice president that people felt very confident in, that they felt like could step in if something happened to old Joe, and that it would be a smooth transition to whatever they're voting for, I think it would be different. But for some reason, and part of this is Republican propaganda, they have worked very, very hard to degrade her and to make her seem like just a completely unacceptable presidential material. And maybe that's also somehow part of her fault and the Biden administration's too. But I think that's part of the problem. And I don't know what can be done about that. It doesn't seem to me like, if it were me and I could just make without caring about anything other than electoral prospects and with nothing else of concern, I would say replace Kamala Harris, not Joe Biden, and replace her with someone that, has a high popularity or would be someone that people could feel more confident in. And that's not going to happen. I mean, I'm not suggesting that it will, but that's my analysis is that that's part of it.
The fear of Joe Biden's age is a function of, and I think there's a lot of reasons. I mean, I don't think that she never, ever, it seems to me, built a natural constituency. Yeah. She's not associated with any particular issue. She never was. She was great on the Judiciary Committee when she was asking questions because she's a former prosecutor. But for the life of me, I wouldn't know what issue out there to associate with her. She never there's a lot of ads right now that they're running with her being the champion of reproductive rights. So I think somehow they know that. What you're saying, I think, is there's an awareness of that, and they're trying to push her I mean,
said,
she may have been,
and I don't know that she ever was before, but I think they're trying to push her as that now.
I mean, when I think of like other candidates in that race, you can associate them with policies,
Absolutely.
some which you may or may not like, and this and that, and certainly some had brands, some that were bad. Like, but hers, she just seemed to, and the one time where she went really hard on something was at Joe Biden, but then a week later that just sort of dissipated completely. So yes, I think that's a big part of the fear. And the real issue to me is not whether someone's going to vote for Trump over Biden in that scenario. The real issue is how many people are going to stay home because of that. Right? I mean, that's the bottom line. We're no longer in that world where I think that there's going to be someone's actually sort of like vacillating between Biden and Trump. Like, I voted for Biden last time, but I'm going to vote for Trump this time. I just don't think that's happening. But I do think that it's like, I went out last time because I really need to get Trump out. But Biden, he just seems uninspiring in some way. And that's why there's been calls for him to sort of like, you need to also have an affirmative message as to like what you're going to try and achieve in the next election. I mean, people forget that, we won the Senate because he went down and said, I'm going to give you $2,000 checks. They ended up being $1,400 and sort of like retroactively counting the 600. All true, but that makes a difference. Particularly when you're talking about an election where we're talking about a very small group of people. And the days of, if you're offering a child tax credit, that's a liability electorally, that seems to be behind us. At least it should be.
So. Yeah, I would hope so.
Be. But
well, I think it's also that, he needs I shouldn't say they, I don't know how, maybe, Grandpa Joe is a way to do it. I don't know. But the big group that I'm most concerned about is the younger group. And strangely enough, it isn't the Gen Zers, the 18 to 29ers who seem, with all the polling, seem to be very engaged. And they actually seem to like Joe Biden pretty well. I mean, at least they're not hostile to him. His numbers with them are, fine, to the extent any of them are fine. The ones who really seem to dislike him are the 30 to 44-year-olds, this sort of millennial group, and they need to find a way to reach into that group.
Well, and part of the problem is that's the group who have parents who are getting towards that age.
Yeah.
And I think that their firsthand experience with their parents makes them
maybe,
worried. I mean,
yeah, maybe that's true.
I mean, I would imagine, there was like a 27-year, 25-year old difference between my parents and me. But I would imagine for people who are like 40 or in their 40s or in their 30s, that difference was probably a little bit more. It was probably closer to 30, 35 years for a lot of them. And they're seeing their parents in their late 70s and going like, I wouldn't want my folks to have that level of pressure in their lives right now. And so I don't know. I don't know how people get over that, but part of it could just also be like there could be some type of, and we're still going to have abortion is going to be a big issue.
Huge. Democracy is going to be a big issue. With these trials going on, you're going to see, that's going to rise to the fore too.
That's going to be an issue. Like, how depressed will it make the Republican vote? I mean, the dynamics are just completely insane.
They are. They're insane.
And we'll know more when we start to see what happens this month with the government shutdown and impeachment. But Heather Parton, I feel like we could continue this for an hour.
Barely scratched the surface.
We really did. It is always a pleasure, and we will pick up on this when we have a little more information about a lot of things we talked about today, and then progressively more and more information. But really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Always. Thanks for having me.
We'll put a link to your salon pieces and, of course, to Hullabaloo.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, folks, we're running a little behind. Apologies. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Jamie Peck will be back to plug something she's doing this weekend, give us an update on Cop City, and an update on when we're going to get more of an update on Cop City. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma out today. Matt out today. But it is a homecoming day of sorts. Jamie Peck, the co-host of Everybody Loves Communism, in the house. Jamie, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me back.
Let's talk about, I know you've been doing a lot of work at Cop City. I want to get to that in a second. But first, are you doing this on a regular basis now with Jake Flores, this live show?
So this will be the pilot. So depending how this goes, we might make more of them. Hopefully, yes, although he is moving to Los Angeles. So we might have to make it a bi-coastal show soon.
This is a live show.
Yeah.
All right, so tell us more about it.
Okay. So it's going to be filmed in front of a live studio audience. It's sort of a mashup leftist comedy, late night kind of variety show thing. Like we're going to have some topical jokes like The Daily Show, if The Daily Show had good politics. Some pre-recorded sketches. I wrote my very first script, Sam. I'd never done that before. Or, half of a script anyway. Jake wrote the other half. So
did you do the first half? He did the second half?
I did the second half. But very exciting stuff. We're going to have some games that we play with our guests. We're going to have Katie Halper and Andy from the Intifada as guests. We're going to have some cool surprises, and we're going to have a great punk band called Bimbos that I met in Atlanta when I was there doing Cop City stuff as our musical guest and as our house band.
Where is this happening?
It is happening at TVI in Ridgewood, New York. Very cool venue. It's my favorite venue in the city right now. It kind of reminds me of places I've been to in Austin because there's like a big patio with tacos and like different rooms to hang out in. But yeah, it's accessible by the subway if you're in the New York City area, which hopefully some of your listeners are.
We have a lot of listeners in the New York City. What time? So what time is it starting?
So, okay, I know I said it's a late night show, but you guys got to get there on time. It's actually starting at 7:30 and it'll be wrapped up by 9:30 because they have...
There's not a single late night show that is on television that is not recorded prior to 7 p.m. So I would not worry about that at all.
I heard some of them were recorded in the morning.
Some are recorded in the morning. Some are recorded at 5 p.m., but nothing is recorded after 7 p.m.
All right. Well, great. Then we're in good company.
So you guys have really pushed the envelope on when you can record these late night shows. All right, that sounds pretty exciting. And let us know what you've been doing for folks who have not been aware. I mean, we've talked about Cop City quite a bit on this program. Prior to, or maybe it was right around the time that Tortuguita was shot and killed by Georgia State cops who were trying to assault the people who were protesting Cop City. But a lot has happened since then. That I feel like was back in maybe in February, maybe even before then. What's the latest in terms of like this? And just to remind people what Cop City is, because it's almost $100 million, or is it more? That's going to be spent on this fake town where police can practice urban assaults.
Yeah, you've basically got it right. It's going to be a giant police training facility, which is basically a police militarization facility where they can, run through all sorts of urban uprising scenarios, practice using military force against civilian populations. They basically have a mock black neighborhood planned, complete with a club and a gas station. So basically all the places where the cops might, violently interact with the population. There's also supposed to be a Hollywood soundstage there, which is also bad for a variety of reasons, including, worsening gentrification in the area. They're also going to be cutting down a giant forest, which is very ecologically important for the air quality in Atlanta, as well as flooding. It helps keep the flooding from being even worse. So, that's always a great idea when faced with climate change, is just cut down all the trees.
And all of these reasons are relevant, beyond them just existing in themselves, because as far as I can tell, at least if we look at public commentary, where the most passion is about whether to support this program or not, that it has broadly no support, or stopping Cop City broadly has the most support in Atlanta. And it seems like the city council is doing everything they can to push back against that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was really corrupt from the beginning, the way they handled this, because the people who live in the Black working class neighborhood surrounding the forest that they're trying to build Cop City on, they can't vote in Atlanta City Council elections. And that was at least partially by design, because they do not want to be accountable to the people who will be the most impacted by it. But people in the rest of Atlanta are by and large against it as well. There has been a referendum campaign, one arm of this very large and diverse movement, a campaign to get a referendum on the ballot to let the people of Atlanta actually vote on whether or not they want Cop City built. Now, I'm pretty sure that they don't, but the city is trying every trick in the book to try to keep this referendum off of the ballot, even though the people doing the referendum campaign have collected over 100,000 signatures, which is about twice as many as they needed by the deadline, and also twice as many people as voted for Mayor Andre Dickens in the last mayoral election.
Wow. And I mean, if the city council thought that the referendum was going to be in favor of Cop City, they would not be fighting the putting this on the ballot. I mean, everybody. I mean, I think it's fairly obvious to everybody. They're very concerned about putting this up for a vote. So
yeah, because if it goes through, like if the vote goes our way and not their way, it could bankrupt the Atlanta Police Foundation, which is the sort of fake charity that private contributors have set up to funnel money into this project.
And we should also say that this is not just about Atlanta. This is, you have a facility like this. It's not like Atlanta is going to be using this facility 365 days a year for the Atlanta City cops. This is going to be a facility where if you live in New York, if you live in Philadelphia, if you live in Chicago, if you live in Jacksonville, if you live in Miami, if you live in Durham, if you live in, I mean, we could just go on and on. I could list every city in the country. Those cops are all going to go through. They're going to, this is the way that they're going to sort of like, they're going to, this is going to be camp cop too, or cop camp, not just cop city in this instance. And so this is an issue that impacts everyone. What have you been doing specifically? Have you been going down there? What exactly have you been doing?
Yeah, so I went down for the first time in March for the week of action that they had then. Mostly as a journalist, I did a podcast episode about it with my co-host Aaron, who actually lives in Atlanta. But also as someone who knows some of the people who are involved, and as someone who was, I was a little burnt out on organizing, and I hadn't taken on a big project in a while. I hadn't taken on that much responsibility. All I'd been doing in DSA was political education, which is, important, but I was kind of looking for something to organize, and I was really pleasantly, I don't want to say surprised, but like really impressed by everything that they're doing down there. So, yeah, I kept on going back. I joined them, and now I am deeply involved, and I do not get enough sleep. So that's the joy of organizing, right?
There you go. And so I know you don't want to, you're not going to tell us right now, but tell us when you're going to tell us and sort of like the nature of what it is that you're going to promote. We'll have you back to talk about that part of it more extensively when you do.
Sure. So, given the current context and the fact that this referendum may or may not ever make it onto the ballot, and there's also, by the way, going to be a stop work order, an injunction to go along with it when the signatures are turned in. But, the city has shown no signs that they're necessarily going to respect that, and they could start pouring concrete as soon as next week. So with all that in mind, we are planning some direct action, and I'll have more information on that soon because I don't want to step on the big announcement.
That's right. Okay. Well, there you go. All right. Well, when that happens, we will have you back on to talk about the substance of that. In the meantime, folks want to check you out. They can go to, what is it again? What's the name? I had it right here. Oh, here it is. If they want, they can go to TVI, right?
That's right. Tomorrow.
Tomorrow
oh my God,
night.
it's tomorrow.
Don't mess around, folks. 7:30, forget that. Try and get there. Doors open at 6:30. Try and get there at like 6:32.
Well, if you want a chair, you've definitely got to get there early.
So check that out. Woke Mob with Jake Flores and Jamie Peck. Check it out, folks. Jamie, great to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. And I can't wait to come back and tell you all about the really exciting stuff we have planned.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Matthew Film Guy will be here. We are back. Sam Seder. Majority Report. This guy. Matthew Freeze? Nope. All right. There you go. Well, I don't know what's going on with you. Matthew Film Guy, what, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, Sam. Hi. I'm ready to fulfill my duties. Yeah, totally fine.
What's going on? What was that about?
What are you talking about?
Oh, no. Were you really? I know what you were doing now. Oh, gosh. Matthew Film Guy. That's mean.
Oh, Matthew, you were McConnelling? Is that what you were doing?
You guys are making it weird, okay? Sometimes these things happen, all right? Let's not make it anything more than it needs to be. I'm perfectly fine to continue on running this segment, being a film guy.
Let's address the elephant in the room right up front, shall we? Because you've been coming on this program for
over 10 years.
Have you really? Have you been coming on for 10 years? Are you sure?
I think maybe 2012 was my first.
Is that right?
Could be. I'll have to check, but yeah, feels like
check
it.
on that. And then, people are aware of you. They didn't see you on video on WTF in the early days. But they saw you undoubtedly on Break Room Live. And then, of course, anybody who saw the show pilot season saw you. And so it's really
Bad Situationist.
Yeah, it's really been 20 years plus. And here you are, after all that time, you've decided to, basically, like, you're trying to look like me. It's weird. What's going on with the glasses?
I got news for you, Sam. There is a clear frames mafia out there, much bigger than you. All of my friends are wearing clear frames. You are really just one of a million people that I'm trying to look like. So, yeah, you're in there. But I'm just trying to, whatever I can do to keep myself feeling young and vibrant. You got to do things to spice up life. So I'm sure that's why you went with the clear frames, right?
Yeah.
That
was basically it. I just got sick of my other frames. Yeah, every now and then you need a change.
And I can't grow my hair like yours. I can't, all these
Right.
other things that are just out of reach for me. So I picked the one thing I can control.
Now let's address the other elephant in the room.
Yeah, I thought that was the real elephant. Okay, go
No,
ahead.
I received a couple of packages at the beginning of this week.
How nice. How
One
nice.
was a beard trimming, basically like bib.
Yeah, it's like an apron. It like catches the hair.
Yeah. And the other was a fan that plugs into your phone.
That sounds handy.
It's handy if it works.
Ooh, wow.
Sometimes people don't, I guess, check stuff that they sell if it works.
Well, that's why they have 100% guaranteed return policy. So any seller would stand
It
by
also came in a mug, like a little teddy bear mug or something like that, ostensibly to protect this thing.
I believe that was a vintage glass Garfield promotional glass from the 70s. So it sounds like somebody was really being thoughtful when they sent you these items.
And there was also was there a shirt? Did that come from you as well?
No. But first of all, I don't think it is fair to say that any of these items came from me. In fact, I heard your reaction
here's the thing is that you wrote a note to me.
Yeah. Do you want to read it?
I don't have it with me. I have all this stuff in a shrine in my house now. But you wrote a note to me. And so I went on there and I said, Matthew Film Guy got me some presents. I really appreciate that. And then I have to find out that actually, no, Ronald Reagan bought them from you. And you sort of like jumped in there and made it seem like they were coming from you.
No, that's absolutely false and demonstrably false. If you could produce the notes, you'll read that the notes actually say, I think you have a secret admirer. And it made it very clear that they didn't come from me, that they came from someone else.
I thought you were the secret admirer.
But my name and address is on the package, so how secret could it be?
I didn't think that you were particularly good at maintaining a secret.
No, I don't think you read the entire note, and there were several notes.
No, I don't have time to.
Clearly, you're confused.
I don't have time to read stuff like that. If you have to say read the entire note, then the note's too long.
But it wasn't that long. It was maybe 3 sentences total.
Yeah,
but
I get a note is 1, maybe 2 sentences.
Okay, but let's just clear the air here. By all means, all I ever wanted is the proper credit for both of those gifts, those very generous gifts, to go, the credit for the gifts, and also, may I say, the kindness towards me during this difficult strike time, in addition to the generosity towards you, to go to Ronald Reagan and only Ronald Reagan, and also credit for his, I think, Andy Kaufman-like sense of humor, in which clearly went over your head. But in fact, now that it's clear to me, the only way to remedy this.
What was the Andy Kaufman sense of humor?
Like that you would enjoy getting random detritus off of my eBay as a gift. It's like
you're making that sound like that's some type of artistic expression, and it really just sounds like more like a way for you to sell stuff.
Listen, to me, honestly, I appreciated the gesture on behalf of all the other people who are going without work during this difficult strike times in the film industry. That's, and honestly, the bottom line is the only way I think for him to fix this is for him to maybe do this again, and then maybe again, and a few times again, until finally you can appreciate his extremely admirable qualities as both a Majority Report fan and also as just an overall, you might say, non-garbage human being that Ronald Reagan is. So I don't know, maybe we'll just try it again.
Interesting. Well, Matthew, you've given us a insight, at least into your life these days. The strike has it dried up your work? Or don't you have a lot of industrial work that you used to do?
I had to rely on that to keep the lights going, but it's not nearly as engaging. And I sort of let a lot of those connections go, so they're not quite as happening. But it's been happening enough that I'm not desperate. But if anybody does want to, tip your film guy, you can go buy some crap that I put up on eBay. So,
all right. I mean, it's hard all around, and I think it's going to be. We're still, I think, a month or two away from like where the pressures really start to build on this.
I'm not thinking this is going to be resolved anytime soon. So we're
prepared. Going into the film festival season. Is starting up in the next, really in the next month, and then through the next 4 or 5 months, and or some of the biggies, and no actors. It's going to be interesting because actors will not be there promoting their films. I don't think, although technically a lot of these are more independent, but I don't know.
There was just that clip of Adam Driver making a very interesting statement. He was there to promote one of his films, and he basically drew attention to the fact that he was allowed to go there because the film studio that he made it for agreed to all the terms. So why is it impossible for Amazon and Netflix to not agree to these terms if we could do it at this level? So to the extent that anybody is getting out there, I think they're staying on message in that way and hopefully just continuing to apply pressure as opposed to letting any of it out, which is, I think, what they were thinking when I think they've now revoked that ability to get those quote unquote waivers. So, we'll have to see. It's a conglomeration of things, but it's not over, even close.
No, I don't think it's close either.
Although having said that, I don't think I'm bound by any of these agreements, but the film that I was in LA editing last year, Brittany Snow's Parachute, is actually playing at the Woodstock Film Festival coming up. So if anybody's in upstate New York and they want to go support a truly independent film that's still looking for a home, go see it at the Woodstock Film Festival.
Exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting.
Do you go up and talk? Because I would imagine people who worked on the movie in your capacity is more in demand these days because they can't get actors.
Yeah, I think Brittany will be going in her capacity as the director, but I don't know if anybody else cast or any of that. That's I'm not necessarily in that loop, but we shall see. I think at least somebody is coming.
So you guys had a falling out, would you say?
No, not a falling out. I'm just not in the inner circle of, creative decision making on this film.
As an editor?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I was one of
interesting.
two
Sounds like
editors.
there was a falling out, but if you don't want to get into that, that's fine too.
Well, I've already discussed the entire situation with you. You just don't recall.
Oh, was that very tenuous situation?
No, it was not tenuous. No. Now you're just making it worse.
Yeah.
There's not
I
tenuous.
don't really remember that conversation,
That's
so I'm
fine.
making it up and
Yeah,
making
you
it
are.
more dramatic because. All right, well, Matthew, let's cut to the
You're
quick then.
a clickbait merchant that just likes
Yeah, exactly. I'm fishing for clicks on the indie movie
exactly. Yeah, smart. You're smart.
grapevine circuit. What should we watch? What should I watch here? Let me tell you what the last movie I watched was. I watched Die Hard with Saul, and he fell asleep halfway through it, and then I was like, "Good, I don't need to watch the rest of it." That movie was okay, but there was a lot of swearing in it, which I didn't really remember.
You don't remember Yippee Ki-Yay, motherfucker?
Yeah, but it's not so. That would have landed a lot more if there wasn't so many other swears in it.
I actually recall having to get my mother to buy me a ticket to that. I think I was still like 11 or 12 when that came out, and she had to pretend like she was taking me into it. And so, yeah, I recall that being an R movie.
Outside of that, I haven't really seen any other movies for a while, actually.
Yeah, I know. That's your thing, though. You don't really do the movies thing. This is more.
Well, there's times I can. There's times I can. And this weekend looks like one of them. What should I watch, Matthew Film Guy?
What should you watch? Do I have to do this specifically for you? Because sometimes I feel that's like, throwing pearls before swine. But, I will tell you something I think you might actually like. But then I'll recommend a movie that I think is amazing and may not be necessarily one you'd want to commit to. How's that for a deal?
Okay.
I recently watched, actually, first of all, I just want to also say this weekend at the Museum of the Moving Image, they're showing an old comedy film that I'd never even really heard of called The Wrong Guy. Do you know this movie?
That sounds familiar to me.
Dave Foley is in it. It was late 90s, around the same time as Caboose.
Yes.
And I guess your old friend Jane Ann Garofalo is going to be there to conduct a Q&A. So if you're in New York, I'd say come see me down at that one.
The Wrong Guy. I did see that. I'm trying to remember what that movie was about, but yeah, yes, because I would watch anything the Kids in the Hall were involved with, particularly during that time. I was a huge Kids in the Hall fan, so that was, yeah.
I guess it got some sort of a cult following, and it's only been on DVD. It's not really widely available, so that'll be an interesting event that I will be going to.
Excellent.
Yes.
Continue, please.
Thank you, I shall. Actually, have you ever seen or heard of the early 80s war film with Christopher Walken called Dogs of War?
Dogs of War.
Now, I can't say that this is any kind of masterpiece, but it does feel like the kind of movie that you would be engaged with on a certain level. It's got kind of action set pieces, but it also kind of has this weird, oddly situated between post-Vietnam and sort of post-Vietnam Reagan, like Rambo kind of, should we have done this? We should be doing this kind of. It's about basically a mercenary who topples a third world country for the CIA, and you're sort of on their side, but it has just a tinge of the sort of hangover of Vietnam where like maybe this is wrong, but enough just like celebration of setting off like rocket launchers and cool things blowing up that sort of anticipates Rambo, which would be
What year was this?
1980.
So we're right on the cusp of this type of thing.
Yeah, it wants to.
This would have been shot. It would have been written before the Iran hostage situation, so there wasn't like this explicit sort of. It is a. That sounds interesting. The timing sounds more interesting than anything else.
Yeah, and it is. It's like part A-Team, part Deer Hunter. So it kind of wants to have it both ways, which is very interesting. So I feel like you would be engaged.
Part A-Team, part Deer Hunter. That is a wide berth.
Exactly.
In which you can, I would imagine, almost every movie is somewhere between A-Team and Deer Hunter.
Well, it's specifically in its relationship to how it feels about, international war and, mercenaries and who's toppling what government and for what reason. So that one's for you.
A-Team, I would say, is not as international as all that, but I get your point.
Yeah. The blowing up stuff.
All right, now talk to, go ahead.
Okay, and now I actually watched the latest film. There's one more that's coming out at the New York Film Festival by one of my all-time favorite current filmmakers, a Turkish filmmaker, Nuri Bilge Ceylan. And I've loved every single one of his movies. His last one, before this brand new one, is called Wild Pear Tree. And it's 3 hours long, so it's got a kind of a daunting runtime, but it is engaging from end to end. It is basically about a young man who graduates. He's the first of his family to graduate from college. His father is sort of a degenerate gambler type, and he's trying to escape his family sort of situation, and he's struggling with it. And it's very much about, the current situation in Turkey. And so it has a kind of a political background. And I actually suggested this to our friend of the show, Gene Bajlan, he would probably get more of it than even I did because of how sort of closely linked to the current cultural moment. Has no real prospects. He wants to be a writer, but he may have to join the army instead. And there's a lot of sort of social kind of constrictions on what he can do. And it's just a really great sort of part family drama, part sort of poetic sort of, cultural narrative. And I could not highly recommend it any more highly. It is an extremely great film. Wild Pear Tree.
Wild Pear Tree.
Yeah.
And is this one of the films that you teach at your learning annex or no?
Now, it's funny you asked that. I try to keep the movies that I assign to my students under 2.5, 2 3/4 hours. So this one is a little bit too long to do that with. So I've kept it sort of a little bit more reasonable. But I'm glad you raised that too, because if you do want to join us and watch some other very engaging, interesting, thought-provoking movies, our new session, it just started. And in fact, I've been authorized to offer a member discount for anyone who mentions that they are signing up through seeing this segment on the Majority Report. So you save a couple bucks. It becomes like $10 a class, basically.
How do you mention that? You don't need, there's no coupon code or anything? You just send a note?
No, because you'll be talking to Sivan, the woman that handles the registration directly. You email through the website. You can go to my Letterboxd or to my Twitter and see the link there. And when you click on the sign up, it's basically just through email. And you just tell them you saw me here. And there's, we already met once, but there's 9 more classes. The next one's on Tuesday. You can jump on at any time. And you can hear from such MR luminaries as the letter hack, Matt Strackbind, to hear how great the class is. We've had a lot of people come in through the Majority Report, including your sister, members of your family. So we'd love to see you all there. And we have a 2-hour conversation about some awesome, thought-provoking movies that, it's like a book club for movies. So it helps you to be motivated to see movies that maybe you wouldn't choose to spend your free time with, but you're glad you did once you actually do see them.
Well, that sounds pretty good. And I like this whole thing where people can drop the name of the show in there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We want to bring, because it started out, as you know, as this sort of senior citizens learning annex thing. And we still have some hardcore, interesting people from that part of the show's history. But it's always interesting to grab a very wide variety of people from really all over the world who have learned about it through you and the show, Sam. So glad to have that.
Well, I just got on the IM Dogs of War is based on the novel by Frederick Forsyth, who had actually planned an African coup with a mercenary that they intended to carry out, but it was scuttled. So Forsyth used his research and plan to write a novel.
That is incredible. I didn't know that tidbit. Thank you, sir, whoever wrote that, or ma'am.
And that was Ryan and Callie. And My Brain Hurts says a movie suggestion for Saul Seder, Small Soldiers with David Cross. Did you ever see that?
No. I believe that's like a Pixar or some sort of animated movie. I did not see
I don't know. I mean, he also did Alvin and the Chipmunks, which I don't want to watch.
Yeah.
So
Dave,
the best thing is, to me, with a movie like that that's that old, I just don't tell Saul it exists, and then it never comes up.
He'll find it when he's ready. Actually, I got one other oldie for you that you might actually like too. It just occurred to me. I just watched an old Bogart movie called All Through the Night. I don't know if you've ever heard of this one. I don't know why it's not more well known as one of his sort of classic Hollywood films, but he basically plays like a gangster gambler type guy during World War II, and they discover a Nazi fifth column working out of Manhattan. And he sort of stumbles onto trying to like foil their plot. It's similar in this sort of Casablanca way where he's just like, I'm just a gambler guy. Why should I get involved? But then he gets involved, and it's Peter Lorre. It's got Jackie Gleason. Wow. It's got a lot of great character actors. And I had never even heard of it until recently. And I don't know. It's kind of funny. It's like a screwball Nazi comedy, which is sort of weird. So if you're looking for something a little lighter in the classic Hollywood vein, you could do worse than All Through the Night.
Well, let me ask you this. Is there for people who are, younger than I and even younger than you?
It's a lot of people.
Is there like a movie or like a franchise that people look upon like we did The Godfather back when? Do you know what I mean?
Is there a franchise that you first of all, you want me to channel the interests of the current generation and tell you if somebody looks upon those films like The Godfather as our generation did?
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't. First of all, I'm not plugged into that enough to tell you.
Like 20 years ago, if somebody said, what do you think was the best movie, broadly, not necessarily like cinema, but somewhat cinema, but the most accessible best movie. I think like the majority of people at that time would settle on The Godfather as like one of their top three, right?
I mean, I've heard that a lot. Does it surprise you that that's not necessarily at the top of my list or never?
No, I'm not surprised it's not on your list.
Okay,
but do you have a sense of like that dynamic can even exist today? Or is there just too many movies?
And honestly, Sam, I got news for everybody. It's a fight to even keep people interested in movies in general, even just as entertainment, let alone as works of art that should be taken seriously. That's my whole film guy thing. I'm pushing the rock uphill. I'm shouting into the hurricane, but I can't even tell you if anybody thinks any highly about any movie at all, as opposed to when we used to think so, or in our 20s or whatever you want to call it, when you first become sort of interested in things like that. There's probably, I don't know, I hear about Fight Club a lot. I mean, it's the film bro. It's the film bro who is still the most sort of vocal, let's say, about what they enjoy. And it's not necessarily a vibe that I sympathize with. So I wish I could say something a little more definitive to you, but let's put it out to the ether.
We do that.
The Discord, the MR Discord. We have a film room there.
Multiple people have said The Dark Knight.
Ooh, yeah. Sure. Maybe
I
so.
mean, I think The Dark Knight is a good movie in that regard, but the idea that it rivals,
Yeah, I think, I would say maybe something like There Will Be Blood, Paul Thomas Anderson, he's the guy that sort of is riding the fumes of the sort of 70s writer-director kind of thing. But,
I feel like a lot of people said Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind at some point as like the number one like 2000s movie, like 2000 to 2010.
Yeah. Well, that's actually pretty encouraging if that is so highly esteemed. I think Charlie Kaufman's one of the great guys sort of straddling that line between personal filmmaking and commercial success. So that's good.
What is it
that's
called?
Nice.
What is it called, Matthew? Synecdoche, New York? Is that
Synecdoche, New York?
Yeah.
Yep. And, Adaptation. I love that one a lot, actually.
I saw a live performance of his first sitcom script entitled Depressed Roomies.
Wow.
At a theater in LA back in the day. Matthew, film guy, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Sam. Same here. Take care.
All right. Thank you for the gifts that you did not send.
You're welcome.
Folks, we're not going to bother with a, I guess we're going to do a Freebie Friday, right?
It sounds good to me.
Yeah. Yeah, we might as well at this point. Let's play this thing. This is nuts. I remember this. floating around out there. It's really less like, I don't know. I don't particularly care. But this is Tucker Carlson. You know, you want to get a notion of what Tucker Carlson's going for, in terms of like what his next step in his career is going to be. And it does feel, doesn't it, Bradley? And we're going to play clip number 8, just so that you know. But it does feel like he put his plans to do his Twitter X show on hold. Is he doing it regularly now or no?
I gotta check, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Orban interview and the
Trump interview.
Yeah, well, I believe those were still both Tucker now. I guess Tucker on X now. Obviously, it's not Tucker on Twitter anymore. But I gotta check if he's still doing it as consistently. But he's the relevancy. I think, as you've said, Sam, you're absolutely right. Like, it was the time slot, not him.
Well, it was both. And it wasn't even necessarily the time slot as much as it was that he's saying this stuff on a cable television show. Like, I could say, you know, the same commentary I give here doesn't have the same weight because I'm not saying it on cable television, even regardless of what the numbers are. But the fact that I'm doing there, you know, would attract more numbers. So just to give you a sense of like where he thinks he has to go with his show, here is Tucker Carlson on Adam Carolla's show. That part is not surprising. But here is Tucker Carlson providing some history lessons.
You know, everybody I knew, the world I lived in Northwest DC, like everyone works either directly for the government or is a parasite on government effectively, including people I love and know really well. And the media is too, by the way. I mean, the media is reporting on government, but it's also dependent on government. You know, in 2008, it became really clear that Barack Obama had been having sex with men and smoking crack. And a guy came forward, Larry Sinclair, and said, I'll sign an affidavit. And he did. I'll take a lie detector. And he did. I smoked crack with Barack Obama and had sex with him. Well, that was obviously true. Nobody reported it, not because they were squeamish about sex or drugs, but because the Obama campaign said anyone who reports on this gets no access to the Obama campaign. And so they didn't report on it. So that happens. That's just one small example, but that happens all the time with lots of different issues.
Now, do you believe that transpired, or do you believe the guy is legitimate, or both?
Oh, the Larry Sinclair story? Oh, that definitely happened. Oh, for sure. I mean, I've talked to Larry Sinclair about
this is awesome.
And,
pause it for 1 second. Pause it for 1 second.
I mean, if you
pause it 1 second. This is my favorite part here. He says, "Oh no, absolutely, it definitely happened." What he's not telling you, he's going to tell all the other aspects of why this Larry Sinclair may not be considered the best source for this. He'll go on to talk about some of that, but the truth is he was invited to, he did sign an affidavit, and he was offered $100,000 if he could pass a polygraph test from a website. He took them up on it, and the polygraph organizers said his results indicated deception. And then the guy said, well, the polygraph sponsors were bribed to say that I failed. I think he said like they were bribed like $700,000 to fail. You know, the thing is, this stuff tends to come out a little bit as Donald Trump understands, right? I mean, he tried to silence one of his critics. Presumably there would have been other people, but listen to Tucker Carlson explain all the reasons why this is a dubious claim and then say, but no, it's totally true.
Believe the guy is legitimate or both?
Oh, the Larry Sinclair story? Oh, that definitely happened. Oh, for sure. I mean, I've talked to Larry Sinclair about it, and definitely it happened. I mean, Larry Sinclair's been in and out of prison during one period. I mean, 40 years ago, he was in and out of prison. He's got a criminal record by definition. He's, poor. He's got a disordered life. He's missing a tooth. Like, he's not, an Atlantic fellow. He's not going to the Aspen Ideas Festival. I think he has a record of deception. Obviously, he does. But this story, if you listen to it in detail, is clearly true. I mean, I'm going to do an interview with him and you can hear it. And again, it's not going to change the world that Barack Obama likes dudes. I think this was well known. Barack Obama said so himself in a letter to his girlfriend. And by the way, that's kind of Barack Obama's business. I'm not attacking him for liking dudes. I'm just saying the amount of lying in the media about it was unbelievable. Like, people knew this was true, and it was quite obviously true at the time. And people who covered the campaign didn't say anything about it because they didn't want to lose access to the campaign. And that happens all the time up and down government. So it's almost like if you have a housekeeper, you think, she works for me. But if you have a housekeeper long enough, you realize, well, you actually work for her. And you get caught up in her dramas. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
there's a weird dynamic where you switch places with people.
And by the way, fire her abruptly and she'll write a tell-all book about Tucker at home.
That's exactly right. And, we don't even have a full-time housekeeper. So, that's not going to be an issue for me. But the point is, you think you're holding government accountable, but actually they're controlling you. That's really
I just love that. We don't need to hear any more of this. I love that. And of course they do. Of course they do. I mean, if they don't have a full-time housekeeper, it's only because they switch so many houses. They have so many houses in which they live in that they don't need it while they're not there.
Oh, I'm a populist. I would never hire a housekeeper.
But I love like how both of these guys immediately feel like they're victims because they have housekeepers. There's nothing worse than having the housekeeper and having to talk to them like they're a human being. That is like, you know what I mean?
And share details about your life and vice versa. That's horror.
Where they trapped in, and then like if you fire them, they're going to write a book and a tell-all thing about all the horrible things they had to put up with you. Daredevil. I smoked crack and had gay sex with both Adam Carolla and Tucker Carlson at the same time. I'll sign an affidavit. They even told me they enjoyed it while on a lie detector. Cogman, sounds like Tucker's Alex Jonesing. Yes, that is exactly my point. That's where you start to go. That's where Tucker's... Understand, there is nothing Tucker will not do to maintain his celebrity or to achieve some measure of celebrity or fame. The guy went on Dancing with Stars when he had no other options as a way of reviving his career. He launched a website, I guess it was like in 2006, he even went to CPAC and said, conservatives don't believe in journalism. We're going to start a real sort of like journalistic heavy website, which ultimately ended up being, was it the Daily Wire? No, it was the
Daily Caller.
The Daily Caller, which ended up like doing Swedish, models stories essentially, and then conspiracy theory stuff. There's nothing he won't do. And so he's giving you a sense of where he's at. Here's another example of what Tucker's willing to do. This is from a week ago. Tucker Carlson has visited Hungary, I think, multiple times over the past couple of years. Platformed Viktor Orban or featured him on his show, which, I guess you don't want to begrudge a fasci right-winger the opportunity to see one of his fasci right-winger heroes. But he's neglected, as far as I know, every time to mention the fact that his father is basically a lobbyist for Hungary and has done lobbying work for them. So it's a twofer, I guess. I don't know. I guess it might be hard to talk about the absolute corruption associated with Hunter Biden trading off his name. We should say, incidentally, that Tucker's dad, if he wasn't in the CIA, he suggested Tucker go in the CIA. I think they rejected him. And so at one point, the guy was just like, well, go into journalism. They'll take anybody. And his father ran the Public Broadcasting Corporation, I think right around the time before he got his PBS show. His dad's been doing that for him for a long time.
Yeah, he was the director of the Voice of America for the last 6 years of the Cold War.
Oh, Voice of America. That's what it was. Here is Tucker Carlson, though, addressing the MCC Fezit. What is that? It's a festival, I guess, in Budapest.
Yeah.
And here you go.
This is not a power that's exporting something ugly to the rest of the world. This is a country concerned with its own safety and prosperity. That's, in the words you used to hear a lot in the United States, a country that is minding its own business. And so even if you disagree, which for the record I do not, but even if I did, and I ran the State Department, I would say, let's take a pass on Hungary. We've got bigger problems. But they can't. They hate Hungary. And they hate it not because of what it's done, but because of what it is. It's a Christian country, and they hate that. And that's the truth. And nobody wants to say it, but it's true. And it's not a particularly provocative Christian country. I don't think most Hungarians go to church. It's not a theocracy. You're not required to believe in the catechism to live here. It's nothing like that. It's a soft Christian country, the softest ever. 300 years ago, people would look at modern Hungary and say, that's not a Christian country. But by modern standards, it's one of the last countries that identifies as a nation built on Christian precepts. Again, not imposing them on anyone else. But that is enough to incite our policymakers in the United States. And that is exactly why they hate Russia, by the way. I'm not a fan of Russia. And if I was, I wouldn't admit it to a Hungarian audience. When I hear Orban described as a Putin suck-up, I think, really? That image of Orban being pushed against a police car with a baton to his neck by Soviet-backed policemen comes to mind. Yeah, he's probably not pro-Russian, just guessing. But why do they make that charge? Well, because one thing that Russia and Hungary have in common is a big part of the population identify as Christians. Now, why would that be provocative? A huge part of Malaysians identify as Muslim. Fine with me. But it's not fine with Washington at all. It's deeply offensive to see that alive in Europe. And that is the core. It's not rational. This is happening on a gut level, but it is expressed through policy. Policies that I'm ashamed of that most Americans don't even know exist. The fact that Americans working in Hungary have to pay Hungarian and American taxes, one of the few countries in the world where that's true, that's punitive, that's punishment. And it's punishment for your constitution and for your attitudes. That is cultural imperialism. That's what we used to call it. The idea that the bigger country gets to impose its way of life on smaller countries, not convince them to adopt our way of life, not convince them to drink Coca-Cola because it tastes great, but force them, convert or die. That was repugnant to Americans. That was the opposite of the American promise, which was, this is all voluntary. Come to our side because you want to. We've got something better to offer you. We're not going to force you. We want you to come under your own free will. And that's no longer true.
The amazing thing is that if Americans have to pay tax in both Hungary and in America for work done in Hungary, that's a function of Hungarian tax laws. Because my understanding is that if you are a U.S. citizen, at the least, you pay income tax to the U.S. government regardless of where you made that money. It may be the case that if you're working in that other country, that other country says you don't have to pay taxes here because of that. I don't know. But my understanding has always been that if you're a U.S. citizen and you're making taxes, you're making money abroad, you need to pay taxes at home if you're still a U.S. citizen. So he's probably making that up. But just the idea that like he's the aggrievement. The reason why America hates Hungary, which I don't, maybe people in the State Department, I don't think they hate Hungary. They have problems with its sort of anti-democratic nature. Not because it's a Christian country. I don't think there was, I think to the extent that there was any Russia issues, like Russia has gotten more Christian in the past, 8 years. I think the big issue with Russia was their involvement with the election, both stuff that we've heard of broadly and also, I think, what we know. But even then, I don't even think it was like the reason why we have a Ukraine war now is because Russia invaded. That's the but for there. But this is, I don't know, this is the way he gets his interview with Orban, right? Call that a beat sweetener?
Yeah, it's similar. It seems like there's some cause and effect stuff, right? Like Tucker scores the interview with Trump. Trump does his first Twitter post in 2 years right after. Tucker does the Mest Fest or whatever that is in Budapest, and then next week gets his interview with Orban. It seems like there's a lot of transactional nature
without a doubt.
The booking.
Without a doubt. You know what? I'm going to turn on the phones. Maybe we'll take a couple of calls. See if we can get this going here. That sound signifies that the phones are open, and there I am. Antifa Lockhart. The reason why the U.S. didn't align with Hungary is because we're so close with Turkey. Who goes hungry after a turkey? U.S. citizens don't have to pay taxes income earned abroad if they are living outside the U.S. unless it's over a certain threshold that's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Tucker is upset that rich people have to pay taxes no matter where they run off to. Says Professor Soy Boy. Hogtown Frown. A few countries like Canada and U.S. have a tax treaty where if you work in those countries, you only pay tax in those countries. But you do need to file with the home tax authority. My buddy is a dual citizen but lived his whole life in Canada. Still needed to file with the IRS but didn't pay taxes. Although Hack All Things says your understanding of living abroad of being a U.S. citizen having to pay taxes to the U.S. federal Fed is correct. Calling from a 360 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Is this me?
Yes, it's you. Your phone is bad.
Excuse me, just give me a second. Is this better?
Yep. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Cool. My name's Ed. I'm from Seattle.
Ed from Seattle. What's on your mind?
Going back to your interview yesterday, you brought up Hannah Arendt, and while I was taking some classes at UW for like political science and stuff, was reading through some of her writings, and one of the things that she wrote in The Human Condition struck me, and I kind of wanted to share it and then kind of flesh it out a little bit. But basically, she says that, excuse me, men are conditioned beings because everything they come into contact with turns immediately into a condition of their existence. And so basically she's saying that like people are unique, or we as humans are unique in that we both condition the world around us to be what we desire it to be, and then are in turn conditioned by that reality that we construct. and almost sort of like narrowed in by that. And I've found like a connection to that with how Marx in like the critique of the Gothic program discusses the process of moving to full communism and how like socialism is the vehicle for that transition, and that there's like a necessary period of like re-education or almost like de-radicalization from like capitalism to like fully be able to break away from it and be able to actually like conceptualize a world and like see a pathway towards it beyond that. Because that's like basically just like the reality we live in. So that's kind of what all that we see. And so basically I see that almost as like a modern disagreement between like more like social democrats or like the people that are more into like trying to work towards changing the system, at least in the short term, through electoral politics, and like the argument between Marx and Bakunin, where like basically Marx believed that there was the transition period was required after the revolution. You couldn't just go like straight into communism, whereas like Bakunin and anarchists are like, no, revolution and then straight into it is like all that we need. And so I kind of wanted to put it in the frame of the discussion between like, you know, people who sort of say electoralism is, you know, you're not going to change the system through electoralism because it's the tool of the bourgeoisie, and you know, like you're not going to win the game by playing by their rules. And I feel like it's almost an argument that discounts the assertion that people collectively have more power than the bourgeoisie, and it's almost like abandoning that principle of leftist thought and political thinking.
Yeah, I don't know about. I mean, I would need more time to absorb like sort of the sort of philosophical argument, but I can tell you that like I am sympathetic to the idea that electoralism is certainly overvalued for the most part in our society, but I am also of the mind that even if you completely disregard electoralism, the idea of voting is just the amount of effort expended there is minimal relative to the obvious implications of it. I happen to think that I don't know that you're going to get revolutionary change through electoralism. I don't think that that's possible, but I do think that you can set the stage for and enhance the opportunity for dramatic change via electoralism. I don't think it gets you there, but it does, I think, can set up the context in which you can get that type of change. And just for example, like this National Labor Relations Board thing. Joe Biden gets elected. He appoints a labor lawyer, a chief counsel to the National Labor Relations Board, who comes in and essentially changes the misinterpretation of labor law. I would call it misinterpretation, or the weakest interpretation of labor law that we've been operating under for 60 years. Comes in and changes it, and giving unions, and I'm not saying that we're going to see some type of change overnight, and it's still contingent upon unions picking up the ball, but it gives unions more power to organize, which is going to empower workers. And then we see, you're creating a context for more radical change. I don't know how that fits in with Arendt and how that commingles with Marx, but that's my theory about it.
Actually, like exactly where I was going with it. So right on.
All right. Appreciate the call.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Calling from a 440 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
It's me. What's going on, Sam?
It's who?
It is, I think.
Yes, it is you. Who's this? Where are you calling
yes. from? Jack from Cleveland.
Jack from Cleveland. What's on your mind?
Hey, I was calling because this is a really serious subject, but you may have seen in the news, but Rudy Giuliani, he is actually running very, very low on money. He's broke right now, and he's actually running a hotline where he's looking for donations. And I just want to let you guys know about this. One thing I wanted to mention is very, very important that you do not prank phone call this hotline. Giuliani, he really needs that money really bad.
It's a hotline that you call into?
Yes, it's a hotline you can call into and donate money, and he needs all the help he can get right now. And I just want to stress, too, that you definitely do not want to prank phone call this hotline. They take any sort of donation, even if you're looking to donate alcohol. You know, if you have like an old bottle of wine or, some Bud Light, we'll even take that, So if you want, I can give you that phone number over the phone if you'd like.
I'm curious about it. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm going to donate or how much I'll donate to Giuliani, but I'll take the call, and if I'll give it some thought. I'll take the number. What's the number?
Yeah, that number is 1-800-224.
1-800. Hold on. 1-800-224.
4919.
4919. So just to be clear, I wonder if that spells out anything. Oh, let me check on my phone here. Let's see if 1-800-224. That would be AAG or BBI, AAG, AG.
I know it goes to the Philippines,
it could
but
be
I'm
bag.
not too sure beyond that, though.
It could be 1-800-BAG. Bag. That would be bag. And let's see what 4919. That would be G. Well, Y or HY. No thing. No 19. So.
Yeah. And like I said, too, so, I mean, he really needs the help, any sort of donations, and, I know he had to sell his home, too. So, yeah, like I said, too, please no prank phone calls. It would really hurt his feelings if anyone was to call that line and prank them. So just serious calls and, call, quick, call a lot. They need a lot of help. So I just want to let you guys know.
All right. Well, appreciate the call. That was a really great public service. And that is, mutual aid is important. Mutual aid is important. So help out Rudy Giuliani if you can. All right. Final call of the day. Calling from a 954 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Michael in Miami. How are you, Sammy?
Michael in Miami. Your phone sounds a little different.
That's because I'm sick as a dog, but I wanted to at least give you a call.
Oh, wow. You sound a little bit sick. What's going on?
That would be a little bit true. And by the time we rendezvous next month in Nevada, hopefully, this will all be a thing of the past. Also had Achilles tendon surgery, which didn't help out either. So it's been a fun couple of months.
Oh, that does sound fun. What's on your mind today?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. By the way, after listening to the prior calls, especially the political theorist, I always feel somewhat inadequate when I call over here because I'm more, I'm a bird's eye view kind of guy as opposed to you guys who get into the nilly willy of the stuff. And it's one of my favorite shows. I mean, you guys bring out stuff that a lot of people don't take time to look at. So I'm always appreciative. I don't always agree. You know that we've been friends for years, or at least telephone friends for years, but it's always fun to see, how things are working. And, that's important. And nuts and bolts, how this stuff gets to where it is and the policies that you guys cover are very important. So kudos, brother. Real quick, two things. One, Rudy is totally broke, and those poor ladies in Georgia will probably never see a dime of the money they are justifiably entitled to.
Yeah, and I should just say, though,
I
should just say, people want to know what that number is to donate to Rudy Giuliani. And if you want to call, the number is 1-800-BAG or 224-4919. That's 1-800-BAG 4919. There you go.
Well, we could make him bag man, bag guy. It could give me any number of bags.
Or the other way of doing it is 1-800 A.
Really good.
If you dial 1-800 A big double X. Is that it? Yeah. No, that can't be it. That's missing one. Somebody screwed up there. All right, go ahead.
Well, the one is the screw up because there's no letter affiliated with the number one. That's the problem.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's kind of like like when you play Scrabble and it's like a wild card. You got to make anything you want.
Yeah.
But look, I think that unfortunately, as a lot of people have sued Trump in the past, although he basically delays and delays and delays, so the judgments usually come in the form of a tenth of what it's worth. In Rudy's case, he does have some sustainable assets. I guess he's going to have to sell his brownstone in New York and some other stuff in order to pay it off. But who the hell cares? If you read this, I know a lot of people haven't. If you read the actual body of the indictment of what they did to these women and how this crazy preacher went down there to personally try to convince one of the ladies to essentially repent and see her sins, it's just disgusting. It's disgusting from a religion point of view. It's disgusting from a human point of view. It's just, they get everything they deserve, everything. And Rudy's only the tip of the spear, but my God, to go down that rabbit hole and to think that not only the guy lost, he hates losing. He associates losing with being a loser. So he basically turns everybody in the country upside down to satisfy his psychosis. That's basically what happened.
Yep.
And he convinced enough people and friends of mine who they were down there on January 6th. They're no longer friends. I've lost touch with them. But, people have essentially just kind of bought into this stuff based on this guy's, one-man personal vendetta.
Yep.
It's sad. It's beyond sad. And unfortunately, these ladies in Georgia got caught in the backwash of this mess to the point where they had no business being. Who cares about poll workers, Sam? Think about it.
I know.
How many times have you gone to a poll? Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I agree, and the fact is they're going to have trouble finding poll workers in a lot of these places around the country because of this very stuff.
Exactly. One last thing before you go. We were right about life down here in DeSantis. I told you that he was. I remember having this conversation with you, and maybe with Emma, or maybe with another colleague. I told you he was a guy who hit AA pitching down here. And once he got exposed to the big leagues, he would not survive. Yeah. And I think that's more or less been proven true.
It is.
People look at Florida.
It is.
Sorry, go ahead.
The real question is what happens if Trump, for whatever reason, has to go. It goes away in some fashion. So we don't know.
Well, I don't think he's going to be the nominee. No, and that won't be because of electoral reasons. I think it'll be for other reasons. Could be health, could be he's in jail, could be the 14th Amendment is utilized against him. And if that's the case, and all bets are off, I don't know who's going to show up on that side. The problem with DeSantis is he's not a likable person.
Right. DeSantis will be bad, but the real problem is that I don't think the Republican Party can do anything that would in any way participate in Trump not being the nominee. Because if they do, they will so virulently piss off 30% of their base that they should have a very, very serious concern that they would lose the House and the Senate in a massive way. I think even if they think that Donald Trump is going to lose, I think they've got to keep him on the ballot, or their hopes of regaining the Senate and maintaining the House are out the window. So, the only thing that's going to keep Donald Trump.
I don't think it's going to be their decision. I know people think this is an anathema, and maybe you and I can make one of our friendly, dollar bets. But I think it's going to be his decision down the road. I don't think he's going to have a choice. He's going to have to pull himself out of there. He's going to have 4 criminal trials going on at the same time.
I think Donald Trump has one defense strategy, it seems to me, with these trials. It's the same with all of them. And that is be president.
Right. Win and pardon myself.
Exactly. And I know that he's not capable of doing that from a state in a state thing, although he's going to try and remand it to in Georgia. He's going to try and remand it to federal court. And So I don't. I think that's his strategy. So I don't think he takes himself off the ballot because that increases his chance of going to jail. It seems to me. But
he's not going to want to do it. He's going to have to do it. I think what's going to happen here, and don't take your eyes off this 14th Amendment argument, because there's a lot of legal firepower and a certain amount of momentum.
But who's gonna facilitate that, Mike?
What's that?
Who's going to facilitate that?
Well, it's going to have to be taken up in the cause. Someone's going to object to him being. It's going to have to be in the form of a lawsuit, like a Mark Elias, or somebody's going to step up and say you can't do this, and they'll be joined as friends of the court by some conservative never Trumpers,
right?
Your friend Mona Charen and all those
and you're
people.
telling me the Supreme Court is going to rule that Donald Trump can't be serve as president?
You know, it's funny. I don't think the Supreme Court cares too much about Donald Trump at this point. I think last fall proved that even when push came to shove, except for Thomas and Alito, he doesn't have votes you can count on with those people.
But that's not the question. That's not the question I'm asking. That's not the question I'm asking. Do you think that is not whether they care about Donald Trump? Do you think the Supreme Court is going to take the risk of intervening it's not inconceivable to me they would do that if, Bernie Sanders was the nominee. But the idea of the Supreme Court stepping in and pulling a candidate off of the ballot. And when would you do that? Because you can't, first of all, I just think the 14th Amendment thing, it's just not going to happen because he's not even charged with insurrection. So how would you
can certainly, but the standard for the suit is not the same as the standard for criminal court.
Well, I understand. All you
have to do is prove by a preponderance of the evidence that you are in fact guilty of this crime, guilty of this transgression, because it won't be a criminal court. But to answer your question, it would work something like this. You would file a suit. Let's assume for the sake of argument that the trial in March, and see, this is the thing that's going to be the wild card. Which one of these trials is going to come to a conclusion first? I think the Jack Smith trial is not going to go 6 months. He narrowly tailored those arguments.
Okay, put that aside, though. Let's just stay with the 14th Amendment. Just stay with the 14th Amendment.
Right, I'm getting there. I am. The issue is going to be this. There will be some type of verdict, some type of nominal determination of his guilt in one of those cases. And that will trigger the need to file the suit for the 14th Amendment. That's going to be the actual launch point. That's just, look, like I said, it's a minority view. It doesn't have a whole lot of support at this point in terms of the overall media landscape. I understand that. But the way these things, you've seen this before. Circumstances outside the candidate's control conspire to create this tsunami of pressure, which eventually force him or her to do something that they don't really want to do. Whether it's Gary Hart, whether it's anything else, these things kind of overtake you. You don't have control of the narrative anymore. Hell, he doesn't have control of the narrative now. Fox News has abandoned him. He can hang out at OAN and right-wing media, but that's a shrinking island. That's not going anywhere. He does not have the broad-based support that he did even 2 years ago.
Yeah, I agree with all that.
And the crazies are violent.
I agree with all that, but I don't think that I just don't think that his.
Well, let me put this scenario in front of you.
He's thinking that way.
Let's assume, for the sake of argument, as they say in my business, that he's convicted by June of 2024. That the Smith trial goes 3 months. Now they're saying it's going to go 2 years. That's bullshit. It's not going to happen. He's going to appeal that decision. Okay, fine. He appeals the decision, and that appeal may be fast tracked. It might not be. But in the meantime, you're going to have more than a couple of people who are moneyed interests in the Republican Party, not interested in tethering themselves to a sinking stone, which is exactly what he'll be at that point, because he'll be a convicted former twice impeached president. And you don't think there's going to be people who are going to quietly and maybe not so quietly settle up to the idea of we got to get this guy out of here. If for no other reason that they don't want to lose the House.
Oh, no. I think you lose the House if he's off the ballot more than you lose it if he's on the ballot.
Well, if you're Brian Kemp, you would say no, because Brian Kemp looked him in the teeth and won that race.
No. Brian Kemp looked him in the teeth and won that race. But that's not. He's running in the entire state of a purple state of Georgia. But if you are in a, and people had a reason to come out and vote, people aren't coming out to vote for, these house races, these purple house races are not coming out to vote if they are disaffected Trump voters. I mean,
sometimes, yes. In my state, for instance,
what do you think is going to happen if the Republican Party is responsible? Let me ask you this. If you think the Republican Party is responsible for kicking Donald Trump off the ballot, and you are one of that 30% of the country that is like, will literally, throw themselves in front of a bus for Donald Trump, well, you think you're going to come out and vote for the Republican Senate candidate in Wisconsin or in Pennsylvania or in like Arizona? Like you come out and vote for Carrie Lake? You're going to come out and no, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. But I think, remember, the narratives can change on the dime. I mean, we were talking, where are we? September of 2023, 9 months from now, which is an eternity, plus 10. You can have a number of different things happen between now and June 30th of next year. Okay?
I know that. I know that too. But
and he may not
Mike, we got to go.
It. And don't forget, my state, and this is a fascinating case study at some point. I've lived in 2 states for the majority of my life, Michigan and, Maryland too, but Michigan and Florida. And if you look at what's happened in the last 28 months between those 2 states, the migration changes, the political changes, it doesn't matter who's on top of the ticket. What's happened is a demographic shifts. I told you guys this before, all those racists who lived in New Jersey and New York and Maryland and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Ohio, they all moved where? Where did they go?
They all moved down to Florida.
Raising my hand. Raising my hand, pal.
Well, I appreciate it. Mike, I got to go. But I appreciate the call.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right,
Take care.
Bye. That ends the call-in portion of the program. Majority Report Wardrobe Coordinator. I wish Republicans try and throw Trump off the ballot or do a brokered convention. The whole base would stay home. I totally agree. Honestly, I think like it is in the Republicans' best interest to even leave him, even if he's in prison, leave him on the top of the ticket, because otherwise they will lose 5-10% or whatever. Phineas Ferb, we're going to pretend Joe Biden looks healthy and Trump can't beat him until he does. No lessons learned. Well, first off, I will say this. There are never, those type of lessons are never, ever learned. With the real no lessons learned is people who expect a political party to learn a lesson like that. There's not a single example of a political party ever learning a lesson like that. I made this argument back in 2016 in the run-up to the election. There's not going to be a lesson learned if people stay home and don't vote for Hillary Clinton. The party's not going to go like, oh my gosh, we should move to the left. I said specifically, I didn't think it would be Joe Biden because I just didn't think that he was that, I just thought he was just, wouldn't even get elected. But I was like, I saw what happened after George Bush, a guy that, people thought should be impeached. Barack Obama was sort of like, almost like a shock. And he wasn't some type of radical. I saw what happened after Ronald Reagan. We got Bill Clinton. It was anybody who thinks that there's going to be a lesson learned by this has not learned their own lesson, which is no. A sitting president, unless they give up their seat, it's incredibly hard to challenge them. And nobody stood up and challenged them. I think it's a problem that Joe Biden is that age. If Joe Biden was 15 years younger, it wouldn't be a doubt in anybody's mind. But who's going to come up and who's going to convince him to get off? We can't even get Dianne Feinstein out of the Senate. So, I think it's a problem. But the idea that, someone's going to learn some type of lesson. No, the real lesson is, if you have a right-wing presidency, the vast majority of Democrats and the vast majority of the country is going to sort of take a flight to safety, which is going to be someone who is like Joe Biden. Do I worry about Joe Biden's age? Yes.
But you also see, I think, an analog with that in some of these Senate races. Like, we'll see obviously what happens, but even in some polling in the early going in the Montana primary, Matt Rosendale, like the Freedom Caucus guy, is already putting his hat in the ring against the NRSC endorsed Tim Sheehy, and he's leading him already by like 20 points. He lost to John Tester the last time he ran against him. And then we also in Arizona will potentially have a, potentially caustic primary between Blake Masters and Kerry Lake, even before we get to the Cinema Gallego aspect of it. Like, some of these races, I think, will also be affected by the same sort of aspect, which is just the galvanizing effect of not wanting a freak in office.
Well, I mean, here's the only value in terms of if you want to maintain the Senate, the Democrats maintain the Senate. The only value of a Kerry Lake Blake Masters matchup, or of the Masterson and the other one in
Montana,
in Montana,
yeah,
is not that they're going to weaken each other. It is that they're going to force each other to become even more bat crap crazy
to get out of the
to
primary.
Win that primary. So as crazy as Blake Masterson is, and as crazy as Kerry Lake is, they're going to have to become crazier to get through their primary, and then they're going to have to cut back and attempt to win in the general. And the same thing in Montana. The same dynamic in Montana. You don't win a Republican primary by seeming like the most reasonable person. And then you've got to go into the general and you're in big trouble. And that's the value of having their primary. Not that like they're going to be weakened only because
they went to the bleeding edge
because they're going more to the right.
Right.
So all right, five IMs, and we're out of here for the week. Sleepy male dad. If the MR crew is going to unionize, I think Sam should do his best to union bust them just to see if he can trigger the Cemex rule. That would be interesting. That seems to go a long way, though. I mean, that's a lot of work. Dixie Average. Sam, is it likely we see the Supreme Court challenge the Cemex decision? Do they have any power there? I would be shocked if there is not a challenge to that. But it is. What was the name of it? The Silk.
The Joy Silk Doctrine.
The Joy Silk Doctrine existed under the same statutory makeup, and I find it hard to believe that the National Labor Relations Board doesn't have the ability to sort of decide between a re-election or instituting the union. Because, I mean, let's be clear, these unfair labor practices, you may have to be suffered for another election, but the implications of those practices already exist. They don't go away. But is it subject to a challenge? I would imagine they decide. That's what the court wants. They can do whatever they want. Garfield mug. Sam, a lot of those Garfield mugs from the 70 days were found to have used lead paint and are dangerous to drink from. Oh, well, thank you, Matthew Film Guy and Ronald Reagan, for attempting to poison me. Morpheus. Goodfellas. I'll read another one. That wasn't long enough. Hogtown. Oh, I already read that. John and Philly. Going back to the 50s, it's almost as if there needs to be a checkers speech by either Biden, Harris, or both. Fair. Bitter Canadian. Just minding our own business. All right, two more. Let's see. Bobby Jr.'s steroid regime. The 30 to 45-year-olds are the ones most effed by student loans. Biden screwed them in the pants. I mean, we'll see how this SAVE program works. Dr. Dragon Rider. 1-800-BAGGY-19. don't shred on me. I don't think the country survives the day that Trump dies, especially if it's while he's running for re-election. There's no way his supporters would be able to accept that he wasn't assassinated in some way, no matter his cause of death. They did January 6th when they thought he lost the presidency. What do you think they'll do when he's murdered by the left? I don't know. I don't know.
Weekend at Bernie's him into office, potentially. Or try.
Yeah. All right. 2 more. Jade Manzies, you jackasses taking calls today. Anyway, you blast off with some THC and enjoy the weekend. Also, Tucker Carlson and his allies are the ones pushing authoritarianism to other places, not the other way around. And ladies and gentlemen, the final I am of the week. What should we go for? 50 Spades of Gray. How about a shofar for David Feldman, whose YouTube channel hit 100,000 subscribers yesterday? Anyone who loves the Majority Report would probably also love David Feldman's take on the day's political news at midnight Eastern almost every night. Awesome. David Feldman, we got to have him on soon.
Yeah. He's definitely due.
He's getting up that early now. He's staying up so late. This goes out to David Feldman. Check it out on YouTube. Bradley, great job today. We haven't had the blowback guys on MR, but we'll have them on again. Somebody just said.
Yes, they're coming on next Thursday, actually.
Next Thursday?
Yeah.
What? I think we're gonna have them on a Friday.
Oh, well, they are. Well, we'll talk. not to spoil. not to Emma cornering your Emma stepping on your booking.
We're gonna end the show and then we can't. Bradley, great job today, flying solo. Matt, Emma, great week in absentia. We'll see you on, and Monday, we're off for Labor Day. We will be running our annual Labor Day collection of clips and audio, so check it out. Folks, have a great Labor Day. You got to check that out. You'll enjoy it. We'll be back live on Tuesday. Great job by Dorsey and John Ahrens, booking, and Christina and Chris. Great job, guys. And Maria, Callie, Julie. See you guys on Tuesday. Have a great Labor Day weekend.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted in